All right, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. My name's Sean Kenny. I'm the editor-in-chief at RCR Wireless News, and we've got a really interesting discussion, I think, this morning that's going to be a nice complement to the programming we've all seen at Tech Accelerate over there. Ostensibly, we're going to be discussing how artificial intelligence at the edge is a really important piece of 5G, particularly as it relates to enabling a lot of these latency-sensitive type services. So just by way of housekeeping, we're going to have about a 40-minute discussion. We've reserved some time at the end for Q&A, so please, if you have any questions, it'll be a great opportunity. And I'd also like to thank the people that have tuned into the live stream. If you're getting up early, if you're staying up late, thank you for joining us. Now I'd like to introduce the panelists here. In the middle, we have Mr. Rainer Liebhardt. He has 25 years experience in the telecom industry. He's formerly with Siemens Fichten Mobile Networks Division, now with Nokia Networks. Mr. Liebhardt's worked as an engineer as well as a standardization expert with 3GPP and ETSI. Previously with Nokia Bell Labs with a focus on 5G, he's now the head 5G solution architect in the Mobile Networks product division. Immediately to my left here, you might have caught her excellent keynote yesterday's, Ms. Caroline Chan. She serves as Intel's vice president and GM of the 5G infrastructure division, which is within the network platform group. You've had a number of positions there at Intel, including in the embedded and communications group. Prior to that, you were with Nortel, I believe, working on LTE and CDMA. Down on the end, we have Ms. Susan Wellstead-Grimaldo of Strategy Analytics. She joined that team in 2008, and she brings over a decade of experience developing strategy and analyzing trends in the wireless and broadband industries. So thank you all very much for taking the time today to have this conversation with us. And I guess to get started here, I'd love to kind of get everybody's perspective on how this massive support for IoT that's going to be baked into 5G, it just brings with it a lot of complexities given the range of different service requirements we're going to see for these different applications. So as operators and their vendor partners start to design their networks and really start to turn these services up, there's a lot of opportunity to innovate here, and I'd love to just kind of get your perspective on how you see this developing. And Susan, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure, and we look at Strategy Analytics, look globally at what's happening. We talk to everyone across the ecosystem, and I think what's really exciting with 5G is the ability to do the co-creation that we're starting to see with pulling in various industries that have very different dynamics and needs and understanding how to develop to that with 5G. And I think that's where having the ability to do edge compute with inside the operator's network as well as in enterprise creates some new interesting areas. And then when you throw in all the things happening in artificial intelligence and machine learning and thinking about how do you architect this in a way that you can open it up with some of the, exposing some of the functionalities that we're looking for in the richness of 5G and that latency, you know, we're creating a platform for innovation and for pulling in other players to help define how they actually want to use these networks to improve their businesses and their own digital transformation and their own things they're trying to do as they move forward. So I think the innovation, it's going to be very exciting to see in 5 years' time. And I think setting it up and seeing all the activity between the different players starting to really come to fruition more. That's what's been kind of fun with the 5G World Summit, is hearing some of those things playing out as the initial trials are really getting some results.
And Rainer, Nokia is engaged in numerous trials all around the world with their various operator partners. What sort of innovation trajectory are you seeing as these projects get more defined and you really get some key learnings out of them?
I think we are seeing two categories or kinds of innovation. I mean, the one thing is more the classical, from the radio and the core perspective. So there we need definitely new features coming up with 5G to cope with the immense, let's say, diverse requirements from this IoT traffic. Billions of devices is the forecast connected in 2025 or 2030. So this is the one challenge, and this is the one kind of innovations we will see with 5G coming up. The other thing is more when we are talking about this machine learning, artificial intelligence, so how to cope with the immense, let's say, data traffic and the amount of data that are coming in, maybe in edge data centers, but also in central data centers. And there we are looking, we have acquired recently a company that is looking into predictive analysis kind of topics. So it's taking the data that's coming from IoT machines, doing machine learning or putting machine learning algorithms on top of these data, and then we are, let's say, on that basis, we are generating new procedures and new services around this IoT traffic. So no manual configuration anymore. Everything is automatic at that.
Right. And Caroline, I took a number of meetings yesterday with various companies that I didn't realize Intel was engaged with, but obviously you guys are casting quite a wide swath as it comes to enabling these different aspects of 5G. So what sort of innovation are you guys seeing with your partners?
Yeah, so because Intel is kind of unique with the portfolio that we have, really spans from, I'm part of the data center group, so we're born in the cloud. That's our core business. And then we extended that to the network side. But on the other hand, we also have AI group. We actually acquired a company called Saffron, does recommendations. And we have Altera, the FPGA side. And we also have a very strong presence in enterprise. So what Susan just mentioned is the fact that the industry is now homogeneous. It's not homogeneous. Like just, what is it, yesterday, AT&T just got approval to acquire Time Warner. And now, what do you call AT&T? Are they a telco company? Are they a media company? Actually, they're both. In reality, the way I think about it, a lot of these telco companies, if we're done right, they're all going to become some sort of a web scale company. In fact, I remember in Austin when you were also there, and we had Reliance Jio on stage. You say, I am a web scale company. So when I look at that, I really felt like, just like Susan said, the innovation has to come all the way across all the domains. And for us, for the business that I'm in, what we try to do is really make the network look more like a distributed data center. So, like you mentioned, from the edge data center, on-prem, we have actually a very strong on-prem business, and all the way up to the data center. The fact that the machine learning, the AI, what it does is it really improves significantly the operational efficiency of it.
Yeah, so just at a high level, that's edge in a nutshell, is taking this compute and storage functionality you might normally associate with the data center and moving it out to the edge to really enable some of these new applications. But I'd love to hear from all of you, just to frame our discussion a little bit. Is the edge, is it a place? Is it a device? Is it an enterprise network? What is the edge? Caroline, let's maybe start with you.
I actually was reading this. It says what is edge? It's hard to describe because the people that know it are already over it.
Yes.
But when we looked at the edge, we actually recently did a strategic discussion with our top management. We actually looked at it as based on latency. So it really depends on the latency requirement. It could be on a device, could be on the network edge, or the cloud edge. The ones that I'm most involved in is really all the way on-prem, on Mac. And then we also have a division that we launched something called NGCO, Next Generation Central Office. Very much in pushing the data center to the edge. Actually, if you look at some of the investment portfolio, you're seeing a lot of the edge data center builders or colos are doing really well. They're taking a lot of investment from VC, and some of them are even showing a very strong revenue portfolio. We recently just looked at a company, and surprisingly, it's amazing that $15 million in the second year of business. So you see that there's a lot of investment going in to push to build out the data center, and we worked with Crown Castle and Vapor.io, a very innovative company out of Austin, Texas, to really look at putting the Mac all the way at the cell tower. So that's an edge, right? Because that's close to where the enterprise and users are. And then we also have deployment now all the way at the retail shops. So connectivity with intelligence, with cloud, to serve where the latency requirements are. That's what I call the edge.
I'm glad you brought up Vapor.io. That's an interesting company. Crown holds a minority stake in them, and I think that really speaks to some of the complexities of the real estate equation that goes into edge. Where do all these appliances physically reside? And Rainier, what are you guys seeing in terms of edge? Is it just defined by what the particular use case is going to be, where that equipment needs to go?
Probably yes. I mean, at least at the very beginning, I think. I think not much to add what Susan said. So it is really so. It depends more or less on the requirements you have, for example, on the end-to-end latency, where you put these small data centers. And actually, when we are talking about edge clouds, we are talking about small data centers. Maybe 1 rack, 2 racks, 3 racks, not more. Can be even in your cellar if you want to have it there. And you can heat your house with them. That is one possibility we will have. But also the interesting thing around these edge clouds and or edge data centers is also that we are bringing together, let's say, very diverse applications. So from the network perspective, we can host their radio and core, let's say, applications and functions at the same time. This is something new, because normally we have the radio sites somewhere out, close to the masts and to the RF sites, and then we have the central data centers, maybe a handful, or even only 2 or 3 of them, and there we have the core functions. But now this is moving together, which gives us a lot of opportunities. And this is also, I would say, a differentiator between edge clouds and central clouds. We will see in the future. Very interesting and exciting thing.
Susan, what are you hearing from some of the operators that you work with? How do they regard the edge?
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting to think about is not just where is the edge, but who owns it, what the value proposition is of each edge, and then who owns the artificial intelligence on there, or who owns the applications and the services sitting there. So it may be multiple players. So how do you create this whole new ecosystem and relationships between the players? You know, as you said, you point to it might be, you know, whoever owns the tower real estate. It might be someone who does micro data centers building out. You know, so you might lease space at the edge, or you might actually own the edge yourself. You know, who's doing all the connectivity parts for that edge? And then, yes, what's going to sit there? I mean, it may be opened up for third-party services to come in and sit on top of that. And what are the benefits of the different edge? And then which edge really needs the intelligence? And what type of intelligence? Because obviously artificial intelligence, machine learning, they're used for different things in different ways. Does that have to federate back into something in the cloud or in the network? You know, there's a lot of different things to think about on the architectural side, but I think just even thinking about the business relationships of who owns it and what they do with it and where the value comes. But as you said, it comes down to a lot of the latency and where's that use case need to put it there.
And the privacy.
Yeah, and the privacy, exactly, very big part.
So Caroline, you mentioned, you know, obviously Intel has domain expertise in data center as well as in artificial intelligence. So maybe tie that together at the edge. When do you need to bring AI out to the edge?
So I'll give you an example. We actually did this at Winter Olympics with Alibaba, one of the cloud service provider out of China. Actually now I think their presence is worldwide. They had this facial recognition, but for us to work with them to put this into the venue in Pyeongchang Olympics, the latency becomes really paramount. So we work with them we have a SDK, the Edge SDK. So we work with them to port part of their stacks in the cloud, the algorithm for facial recognition onto the edge. It improves the latency and it creates a local ownership, because a lot of this has some data sovereignty issue as well. So when we started this, it was a pavilion, because they also are a Olympics global partner, and so is Intel. So we jointly work on that project, and taking that facial recognition, who you are, and then they start building a profile, because we also all going to be part of the sponsor in the Beijing Olympics. So they started offering you like packages, vacation packages, and for the Olympics, and understanding your family needs and roughly your preferences. And in addition, they also start predicting where the traffic is going to be. So the managing the traffic, predicting from starting, I think it was like 30 minutes out, and by the end they were doing an hour and a half. So latency is one, local data sovereignty is another, and a faster reaction. But the fact that the algorithm can be broken into what's in the cloud and what's on the edge, that's really a very good example of how that could be used. And I understand that they also start doing that at the subway stations metro stations in Shanghai, where people coming in, instead of swiping the cards and using facial recognition. In that case, you can imagine the amount of latency that people will tolerate is very, very little, right? You're not going to stare at that for seconds. You're going to look at it and then you should get either go or no go. So a lot of those applications, just taking a very practical one and illustrate why AI at the edge actually started making sense.
And Susan, does that kind of track with your discussions with operators, or is edge one discussion, AI another discussion, or are they kind of convergent?
I think it depends on which operator you're talking about and where they're coming from, because obviously a lot of the large players are doing a lot with AI, their own analytics, they're developing their own things. They're also doing a lot around edge and working on that for particularly smart cities and things like that have some real key applications that they're working on and have end stakeholders who really want to think about that, and some of the vertical industries. So it may be in certain locations, certainly that's starting to come together. I think there's a lot of other operators who are saying, we know we probably need to have this, we might need to get there, we're thinking about architecture, but how do we compete to get resources to do all the data scientists, AI folks, when all these digital native companies out there are hiring them so fast, we can't hire people, and we have to change our processes to think about what we're doing and how we work in these spaces. So I think it's evolving. I think there's a lot of opportunities to say, here's some sort of best practices and ways you might think about doing things. So that's something we certainly try to look at from region to region. And where you sit and who you're serving is going to make a difference. But I do think AI and edge really become table stakes for 5G. Do you need it everywhere? Maybe not. And maybe we're seeing a lot more on-demand sort of use case development type approach to 5G deployment overall. So I think as you go to 5G, you think about where's the money going to come in with the deployments. So I think that's going to be a part of that discussion. But still a lot of work to be done still, but a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, Rainier, maybe you could expand on that a little bit. Is an investment in edge, is it valuable if that AI is not baked into it, or is it something that, I guess, do operators see it as something that would be nice to have, or do you have to have it?
I think this discussion is at an early stage at this point in time. I think we are currently investigating also internally, our research department, for example, how we can get this artificial intelligence, for example, even in our radio products. This is also an exciting and interesting topic. And this Open RAN initiative, so they are looking into a kind of a radio controller that is sitting on top, that gets a lot of information from the different sites, from the different base stations, and based on artificial intelligence, and by the way, this radio controller is then sitting, for example, in the edge. Based on this information, artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms is taking then predictive analytics and logic decisions on, for example, radio resource management. So even the discussion around the edge sites, whether it's needed, what are the use cases and so on, is at an early stage. So we are in heavy discussions with the customers on this, why it's needed, where's the TCO, is money coming back in, and this kind of stuff. But from my perspective, when we are looking into 5G and the next 5 to maybe even more than 5 years, then it's a must, because we are talking about this low latency applications, and this only can be achieved if you have this edge clouds. Maybe not at the beginning in all of the sites, maybe even not in 20 years in all of the sites, but we are starting, let's say, in campus sites, in enterprise sites, in dense urban areas. There you can build up these edge clouds. And then you're also enriching these edge clouds later on, for example, with artificial intelligence and machine learning logic and features.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's very much early days for this conversation, but over the next 5 years, Susan, how do we move from vision to reality? What are some of the business cases?
I think one way to think about it is, in a case, the service provider or the network owner becomes their own anchor tenant, because there's so much they're going to need to be able to do with automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning and predictive analysis at the edge to manage the scale of all the connectivity and the data sets coming in from devices. So if they don't do that, they're not going to be able to perform and deliver on 5G. So you need to have it for the efficiency. I mean, if you want a cost-effective deployment for 5G, you need it for your own efficiency and your own ability to do this whole new service-based architecture. But you also then need it to open it up and do AI as a service, for example. So it's new revenue opportunities as well. So yes, it's early days. We're still working out a lot of things, but I think it does become you do see a need to get there. So getting that approach is important. But yeah, it's skill sets, it's processes, it's people skill, it's how do you think about things. It's doing your more DevOps way of thinking. It was lots of things that fit into this challenge. But just doing the whole virtualization and softwareization in the network opens up a whole new way of doing things as you move to 5G. So it's not just the AI piece or the edge piece. There's a lot of things that are moving. So it's how do you do the architecture? Why do you do it? Where do you do it? Who's involved? How do you create the partnerships? How do you do the procurement? How do you do liability? I mean, all sorts of things.
Yeah. In fact, I was just going to interject, because both Nokia and us are on the TIP initiative. I'm sitting on a TIP board along with the Nokias. In fact, when we start looking at it, this is called Telco Infrastructure Group, right? But at the end, we start looking at, we actually kickstart a AI and machine learning working project group earlier this year. People are like, is that too early? Because you're still talking about doing the network, pushing the network low cost enough to do a widespread deployment, as well as prepare for 5G. But the board made the decision that we needed to start this AI and machine learning project group in conjunction with everything else that's going on. And because we firmly believe that AI will play an important part in the network going forward, like the example that you raised. What about dynamic network slicing? People talking about very, very precise SLA for a particular function. Could be factory, so in that kind of, or public safety. So you do need to have that constant learning on the edge. So that's why we took the initiative, and it's going very well. And we're plugged in. We're going to do a TIP Summit October back in here. So I hope to see all of you guys. Will be able to report out some of the results.
You know, you mentioned public safety there, Rainier. I believe you wrote a book, LTE for public safety. Are you working on one that's edge intelligence for public safety?
Nobody told me that. We're a famous author here.
You're right. We are working on a book. That's correct. Not on this particular topic, but it's more on 5G in general. So, and it has also one chapter inside about this edge computing and artificial intelligence inside edge. But it's not only focusing on this. I mean, just one add-on, because I think this previous discussion was quite interesting. So I think where this artificial intelligence, this machine learning comes into place is simply spoken when we are talking about handling the immense amount of data we have in the networks. We have a lot of data in the networks, but we are not doing anything with it. Or not, let's say, not on a predictive analytic kind of way. So it's more, from time to time we are looking into the data, for example, for configuration purposes of the radio sites or so, or the cell sites. But we have so many data in the network, we should do something with it. The operators should do something with that to operate the network in an efficient way. But we should also take these data and give it, taking privacy, security into account, definitely, for example, to third parties. Generate statistics and give, for example, to IoT service providers then statistics. But this is all only possible if we are doing this with intelligent algorithms. So not manually, clearly not.
So Susan, we're expecting in the US some 5G deployments later this year, second half of the year. AT&T and Verizon both looking at kind of different variants there. My perspective on it, in my conversations with colleagues in Europe and in Asia Pacific, is that there's a lot more interest there in that standalone 5G and R variant, really using that for vertical enablement as opposed to maybe a consumer-facing service. As Edge fits into that, what's sort of the differentiated value that you would see related to a consumer-facing application and then something that's a lot more bespoke and tailored for a particular industry?
Right. I mean, I think Edge and the AI in the Edge is important both for standalone or non-standalone. I mean, I think in the US, we wanted to get there quickly, and standalone or non-standalone is what's ready. So that's what we're putting out first. It doesn't mean we won't get to standalone, and it certainly will be there as soon as it's ready, put it that way, I'm sure. And we're seeing a lot of variations of, 4G is a big part of the mix still, and Wi-Fi, and we're seeing Edge and AI starting in some demos around, with today's network. So you don't have to have it any certain flavor, I think, to do it or to find the value proposition. But looking between consumer and enterprise, I think it can be important for both. I mean, obviously, one of the things to think about is that we're talking about the volume of data. So video, of course, and as video gets richer and richer, you get more traffic coming in. Some of that's for consumer. We're going to see a lot of video generated by machines and consumed by machines that humans don't even touch. And you want to keep, that might need privacy. It might need just the ability to do some AI on it for the recognition of things or finding anomalies. You want to keep that close to the edge. So I think the opportunity to drive some new business cases is really rich on the enterprise and the vertical side. I think you can also open up some of the capabilities of AI at an edge to small and medium enterprise that might not do their own on-premise type solutions, but might benefit. So I think there's the AI as a service model can get interesting as well. But it can be important for consumers. I mean, we'll obviously see some great sort of AR, VR things that, the innovation gets unleashed and you see where we go with it once you put the ability to do that.
Okay, well, to maybe bring that alive a little bit, Rainer, Nokia is engaged with Deutsche Telekom in the port of Hamburg. Very interesting 5G project. Susan, you mentioned VR. I believe VR is being used in that case for critical infrastructure monitoring, but then there's also traffic management and a number of other kind of applications that are being tested. What are some of the key learnings that are coming out of that pilot, and what does it portend for the development of 5G and the edge for these industrially facing applications?
Well, the main, let's say, the main purpose of this Hamburg port, let's say, trial or proof of concept implementation is to show that, especially when we are talking about edge clouds and about network slicing, I think we even did not touch it, but they fit together quite nicely, that these are the key ingredients of these 5G networks in the future, especially when we are talking, let's say, about these critical communication applications. So there, as you mentioned, we have different applications running in this port. Almost all of them have very high requirements on resiliency, availability, and high requirements on latency. And we are testing there since 2017, and this is continuing the next year, so this is very long-lasting, let's say, trial. We are testing there how this network slicing can be implemented in real environment with edge cloud. So we have local data centers at the port, but we have also central data centers, even, for example, in Finland or in Munich or in Bonn with Deutsche Telekom, as you mentioned, where data are stored and delivered, or where control plane, let's say, from the core network perspective, control plane elements are located. But then local data centers where, for example, this rendering of the videos and so on is done locally. And what we have seen currently, I mean, this network slicing is one of the key ingredient features because it allows us to isolate these applications, strictly isolate from security, but also from latency perspective, resiliency perspective, between each other. Otherwise, I would say we have to over-engineer the whole network so that it fits to all of the applications at the same time. And we are talking really in future, I mean, Port of Hamburg, the expectation is that we have, let's say, hundreds of thousands of trucks and so on at the site in 2025, and we have 18 million containers in 1 year and so on. So this is really huge stuff we are talking about. So it's not a small enterprise or something. It's really huge stuff. And that is the really nice thing, that it works with this 5G, with network slicing, and with edge clouds.
Okay, so that's a real-world example. Maybe
that's a real-world example.
Maybe let's look at a hypothetical example. Caroline, you and I were chatting about this on the phone last week. In May, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a decision that will essentially pave the way for states to offer legalized sports gambling. So, you know, this is a very sort of a highly transactional, large volume, very much time sensitive. I mean, is this do we all need to start working on the sports gambling edge use case?
How do you know I haven't even started? I already started. No, actually, I forgot one of your colleagues wrote that. This is one of the best use cases for 5G. So this is really truly number one is lower latency, and you have to guarantee a high frequency financial transaction. That's what it is. But on top of it, you need some kind of recommendation, right? So every gambling betting fan wants to know what is the odds that this particular LeBron James three-pointer will hit. So that sort of things, I really believe that it will be a very good 5G use cases to look at. And I think Mark Cuban even came out and said, I might quote him wrong, he said that the sports in-game sports betting will increase the valuation of his team 2x. And somebody else said, well, that's just actually too low. Because think about all the revenue you generate for people that gambling in stadium or at home, all require a transaction that can be certified as secured and fraud-proof. So that work is actually started, and in anticipation of that. But I think it'll be very good use cases for both recommendation on the edge and low frequency.
So when will we see the Intel sports gambling tech stack hit the market?
I don't know.
Keep me posted, please. All right, so Susan, we're getting kind of tight on time here, but I wanted to maybe hear from you. What are some of the big challenges, technological, business, or otherwise, that operators are going to have to work through as they push out to the edge and turn up these new services?
That's a tough one. I think they're going through so many challenges right now in general. How do you keep making money? How do you deal with all the changes with all new players coming into your space? You're trying to act more like a digital native company, but you're not, and you're trying to get there a bit. And you've got your 4G coming, your 5G. You've got to think about how you monetize all this and architect it all. And so lots of things happening all at once, which makes it part of a bigger challenge, I'd say, or a range of challenges. So I think we can't just say 5G and then forget everything else that's happening. You are trying to become a much more digitally transformed company. You're trying to learn your own lessons that you're trying to then help your customers do. And as vendors as well, you're trying to transform yourselves and take that out to the vendors. So I do think a lot of the challenges become people and processes. But then behind that, you do have the technology. There are lots of the piece parts put out there, but I think this exciting thing with the machine learning, it keeps learning and it keeps going. And you have to get the right data sets and figure out what decisions you're trying to drive with those, and how that impacts the business. So sometimes I think even just that thinking process and getting the right skill sets, not just someone who knows how to do edge or someone who knows how to do artificial intelligence, but someone who knows the operator business and the specific challenges. So it's hard to find that mix of skill sets and put them together, I think. So I think skilling up, and that's where I think some of the vendors are working together very collaboratively and having that role of much more of a partnership to develop and to pull in industries and develop in that case, because each vertical has a lot of specific needs. So if that's one of your key stakeholders you're going after on the monetization side, you need to do that. And on the dynamic slicing, I mean, that's how you get to the promise of 5G. And that's where it does play such a key role to be able to deploy that and to get to that. So I don't think in this year's deployments and launches and commercial, we won't see dynamic slicing. It's a little early for that, right? But we need to get there, and we need to keep moving fast and learning as we go. So I think just keeping an open mind to learn and how do you keep skilling up?
Right, so Caroline, one last question, just as service providers develop and execute a strategy that encompasses edge AI as part of their 5G plans, what would you recommend that they really focus on? What's sort of the core concern here?
Well, it's going back to a couple of things, like security. Everybody wants to know this is secure. Security, maintaining the data domain sovereignty, that's another one. And one thing that we did learn is, just like Rena was saying, we've been working with Nokia quite a bit. A lot of times when you do proof of concept, you actually learn the pitfalls and the pros and cons. I think it really is about you have to roll up your sleeve and do it. Some of the things we did together really taught us what not to do, what can be improved. And sometimes, even the public policy has been changed too. We were just in a discussion at GSA on day 0 about liability. Now you're trying to do it into factories and up to doing digital automation. Whose liability is if something goes wrong? Before it was just you and the consumer, right? That's your direct billing relationship, and something goes wrong, it's FCC or you. But now you have the third party involved, and who certainly owns some of the liability. So the roles of responsibility, I think, does require some consideration.
I think we have time for a few questions. Anyone out here have anything that they'd like to ask the panel? You just raise your hand. No? Nothing? Yes?
On that, when you mentioned the network slicing, the question that I approach is very network-centric, and I think we can benefit from AI and edge by moving the decision flows per user choose which network slice is best fitted without having all the signaling going on in the air interface and driving the network. So what are your thoughts on that, and are there any plans towards it for 5G?
I mean, when it comes to network slicing, as you said rightly, a lot of things or features are currently, I would even say, core network centric. So even not spread. I mean, logic is not spread, for example, to the radio sites. This will definitely change when we are talking about slicing, but because slicing is an end-to-end concept. So it affects definitely the core, clearly, because we have different logical networks in the core on virtual VNFs running there. But we will have also slicing functionality in the radio itself. So on the base station side, for example, we are planning, and this is also the plan, I would say, from 3GPP then later on in release 16, to have slice-specific, for example, schedulers, something like that. Or you move, for example, central parts of the radio closer to the RF side when we have strict requirements on the latency, or you move them more far away. Could be even, let's say, 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers away then from the radio side. But also, as you said, some logic at least is also on the device side, because the device has to know when an application is starting on the device, what requirements has this application. So currently the idea is to do this per configuration. So per application, we assign a slice identifier, and the device is sending the slice identifier towards the network. And based on that, we select the slice. But this might not be the future solution, not a future-proof solution. I could also think, for example, if you have a lot of computing power on the device itself, depends also on the development of the chipsets, and we could also do some intelligence in the device itself, for example, to select or, let's say, support the process in selecting a slice.
Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, it's actually a follow-up. I was going to ask, what are the thoughts from folks about what do we need to design going forward, or think about design going forward on the device side to be able to accommodate this, whether it's looking at the edge, or even thinking about the power management aspects of this, which I could imagine could become a challenge. So I just thought you might have some comments on that.
Who wants to take that?
Well, I think we start thinking about, at least from the Intel Labs perspective, a closer tie between the device and the network. Because now that you have the intelligence, presumably you have the information that 3GPP is looking for, you might be able to offload some of that from the client to the network, and vice versa. I think that is definitely something. I don't know if release 16 will take that up, and certainly I know some universities. I started doing some research. Intel Lab folks definitely already have some thoughts in mind. I'm sure Bell Labs, given the trust of talents there, is probably already deep in the thoughts on that.
I mean, on the device side, rightly said, I mean, there are some, let's say, limitations given by default, I would say. So the computing power is one thing, as you said, the battery lifetime is another thing. When we are talking about very cheap devices, let's say the smart meters or so, definitely I would say putting too much intelligence there makes no sense. Clearly not, because we are talking about 10 years battery lifetime, even 15 years maybe with 5G. So this would be not achievable if you put a lot of computing power there. Makes no sense. So these are cheap devices. The intelligence is in the edge or even in the central clouds, clearly.
Yeah, I think it's
other
interesting.
type of devices might be different.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the intelligence in different locations can work together. We need to figure out how that really happens, because it might be, some intelligence on the enterprise edge that needs to be there to keep stuff local, or just you don't have to consistently connect in case you have connectivity issues if you're in a remote location. But then that also does need to then connect back into the thing, or you might have a vehicle. That's autonomous driving. That's certainly a big use case here, but you might need some things that certainly have a lot of intelligence on the vehicle itself to connect in case connectivity is lost or whatever. So they play together, and I think how that all plays together, as you said, it's being worked on.
I mean, a car could be really a mini data center on wheels. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Anybody else? I believe we have time for one more. No? Mr. Raven.
We just need to make sure that this table stays the.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's up with that table? Too much coffee.
So Ken Raven, Critcom Insights. A question about the standardizations effort. So much of the standards efforts is focused around 3GPP, naturally, release 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yet, there are other standards bodies that come to play, and I think of IETF, for example, with all the IP-related standards, IEEE on another set of standards. With slicing, what other entities are looking at these capabilities that will be created by 3GPP and are they starting to think about providing supporting standards that help feed and tap this capability?
There are different, let's say, SDOs looking into this topic. As you said, I mean, 3GPP is definitely at the core of the 5G standardization, also with slicing. But also, by the way, this SA5 group is looking into network management of slicing. But then we have, for example, on top ETSI. ETSI is looking with a new ISG, I think the name is SUC or something like that. They are looking into an end-to-end service orchestration kind of stuff around slicing, because this is something 3GPP has not in the focus so far. And also from our perspective, this is absolutely, we have not touched this now during this discussion, but this is absolutely necessary in the future. Because when we are talking about all of these edge clouds and everything running in these edge clouds is virtualized, part of different slices even, we have to manage this. So we need an end-to-end orchestration view of the whole network of the different slices. So this is something this ETSI group is, for example, looking into it. And then we have also this ETSI-MEC. We have also not touched this, but this is also a very important group because it is looking how we can, let's say, standardize interfaces between applications running in the edge cloud and the underlying layers.
Yeah. And then to your point, right, you have 3GPP, you have SC defining this. But there's a lot of verticals setting up their own interest group consortiums. Like we're jointly involved in AECC for Automotive Edge Cloud, you have ACIA. And these interest groups are putting forward requirements, try to influence the ones they just described.
Also GSMA is looking into this.
Oh, that's right, that's right, yeah.
All right, well, I really appreciate everybody coming to join us this morning. Thank you to the folks watching live, and thank you for the great questions. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.